All right, you guys, today we're going to be talking about the menstrual cycle, and I want to remind you about what your homework is. Tonight, you're supposed to do your interactive notebook, pages 39 and 40. 39 and 40. That includes, of course, making sure that you go back and you finish up your notes on page 38. Okay, your notes on page 38 is what you should be looking at right now, right? So we have our notebooks out, and we're looking at the notes we've taken from our textbook and from the PowerPoint that is online. Okay, on the menstrual cycle. The PowerPoint online, again, is the one from the textbook. It's not the one that I'm showing you in class right now. So I'm not going to post this one. This one is just there to support. I don't want to post it because it belongs to someone else, although I've changed it and added a few things. All right, so today, this lecture should be enlightening for both males and females, because most of you guys, the menstrual cycle is a complete mystery for you. When you were in elementary school and in junior high, they did the separating the boys from the girls when they did the talk. Okay? Why? Because they want you to not feel embarrassed or inhibited when you're younger and when you're experiencing these things, for the very first time. Now, I think it's important that you guys all understand the menstrual cycle and understand what's going on and some of the misconceptions that are out there. Some of the really bad, incorrect information, like you can have sex during your period and you won't get pregnant. That's absolutely not true. Okay? So, say that again? Not necessarily a higher risk, because that's not the optimum time. So we'll talk about the optimum time for pregnancy, your fertility days. I really strongly urge you ladies to use P-Tracker, the app on your phone, or some other period tracking app on your phone, because that allows you to keep track and kind of have an idea of what to expect and when to expect your period, okay? First of all, and the interesting thing is that the menstrual cycle, it's not exactly 28 days. Everybody, it's a little bit different. It can be shorter, 25 days. It can be longer, up to 30, 35 days. It's just whatever is normal for you. And stress and how much sleep you're getting and what's happening in your life, all of those things can influence your periods. And in most cases, you'll skip periods. A lot of stress will make your periods, it'll come later, or you may skip it altogether. Periods are also impacted by your percent body fat. And so if you're really, really, really physically active and you're like a gymnast, a professional athlete basically, a lot of those gymnasts don't really even have periods because their body fat content is so low, because estrogen is stored in fat tissues in the body. Okay? There are 3 main phases to the menstrual cycle. And another thing that people don't really understand is that how you count the days on the menstrual cycle. So if you're going to go low tech and just mark it on your calendar at home, what you need to understand is the very first day of your period, the very first day that you start bleeding is when you have day number 1. Okay? Day number 1 starts right here when the endometrium is started to break down and fall apart, and that's when it starts to come out, and that's your period. At that point, we have 2 cycles here. We have the uterine cycle, and then we have the ovarian cycle. So you drew the ovarian cycle in your interactive notebook, and you showed the changes in the ovary. But there are also changes that happen to the lining of the uterus. And at this point in days 1 through 5, that's when you're going to experience bleeding. Not heavy bleeding for the whole time. Maybe it starts off heavy and then it starts to taper off. You only lose about 2 tablespoons of blood and only about a half a cup of liquid altogether. It's not just blood that comes out, it's mucus and tissues and sometimes some clots and things like that. You will learn what's normal for your body, but it can change, and as you get older, your periods change too. So, the beginning of your menstrual cycle is day 1. Keep track of that, because that's going to be how you'll know how long your cycle is from period to period. During that time, it's going to last the first 1 to 5 days. 1 to 5 days is when you're going to have your period. And then from that point on, your the next stage is the proliferative stage. To proliferate means to increase. So during the proliferative phase, this is going to be an increasing in the lining, the thickness of the lining of the endometrium. And this is stimulated by a couple of factors. An increase in FSH, follicle stimulating hormone. Here, follicle stimulating hormone is going to cause an increase in the size of the follicle on the surface of the ovary. And that will be replaced by an increase in luteinizing hormone, okay? And I'll spell it there for you. Luteinizing, sorry for the bad penmanship, hormone. And luteinizing hormone is going to provide the signal for ovulation. Now, if you're on that perfect 28-day cycle, and sometimes it works out that way. It is actually 28 days, which isn't it interesting? Guess what else cycles every 28 days? The moon. Yeah. And so that's why women over time, throughout history, have kind of gotten a bad rap with the cycling of our bodies and the phases of the moon. And that's where that whole lunacy word came from, is that, the cycles of people going crazy during a full moon, and you're a lunatic. And women were considered to be the weaker species, because the weaker member of the species, because they didn't know they were hormones, but we fluctuated and we had these crazy times during the month, which is, really kind of silly. But we do have changes in our hormones on a monthly basis. They do cycle, and it does make you feel differently. But sometimes just understanding, and there is such a thing as premenstrual syndrome that can be really, really severe in some people, but not everybody. So just know that historically that this is one of the things that was, held against women, is the fact that we cycled. So women were actually considered to be, go crazy once a month. And some people actually kind of do, but that's not the norm, right? Okay, so the diagrams over there on the slide just show that the period of time that you're menstruating, the follicular development, it follows the development of the follicle on the ovary. And then symptoms of PMS, and I don't know if I can enlarge this. It enlarges on my screen, but it's not enlarging on yours. So I'll read them off to you, and you might have a harder time. You can probably enlarge your screen when you're looking at this on the computer, for those of you that are listening to the screencast. But anxiety, anger, bloating, brain fog, cravings for sweets and salty foods, fatigue, depressed, tired, lethargy, irritable, tense moods, joint pain, less interested in sex, headache, indecision, insomnia, weight gain, swollen hands and feet. So those are really extreme PMS symptoms, not the normal what most people experience. Okay, moving on. So then we have ovulation. Ovulation is going to take place about at that midway point through the cycle, about 14 days. So you're going to be, if your cycle is 28 days, okay, days 1 through 5, you're actually having your period. And then about 6 to 13, the uterine wall is building up and proliferating. So we have menses here, okay, menses, proliferation. And then day 14 is ovulation, but it's not exact. If you're not on a 28-day cycle, you're not going to be ovulating on day 14. And unless you are one of those rare cases where you can actually feel ovulation occurring, you don't know when you ovulate. And so this is where people run into problems with not using contraceptives and then unexpectedly getting pregnant. Because the egg isn't just there one day only and then it's gone. It actually lives for a few days, and sperm live for a few days. And so there is some wiggle room here as to the number of days that a woman is actually fertile. You're actually fertile leading up to day 14. Because if you have unprotected sex, the sperm will still be around, alive, making their way to the fallopian tubes. And so at any point when they encounter the egg, because fertilization does occur in the outer 1/3 of the fallopian tubes. At any time when that sperm encounters that egg, fertilization can occur. If the egg isn't ovulated exactly on day 14, if it's ovulated on day 15 and you have unprotected sex on day 14, the sperm will still be alive. If you ovulated early for some reason, maybe you ovulated on day 12 and then you have unprotected sex on day 14, the egg doesn't die right away. It lives for a couple of days and then the sperm encounter it and you get pregnant. So it's not an absolute. It's not like, oh, day 14. No, you need to understand there is a window of fertility, a week-long window of fertility there about midway through your cycle. So unprotected sex, we should always be using 2 forms of contraception. Okay? 2 forms. So that means you're on the pill maybe and you use a condom. You use a condom with a spermicide. Because you use condoms to prevent the transmission of sexually transmitted diseases. You use the pill to prevent pregnancy. But the pill does not stop STDs. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. So we have the proliferative phase and then ovulation here at the midway point and then the secretory phase. And this is not talking about the secretion of the lining. It's talking about the secretion of the hormone progesterone coming from the corpus luteum. And we remember where the corpus luteum is? The corpus luteum is on the ovary. The corpus luteum is the white body or the scar area on the ovary where the egg has been ovulated, where the ovum has been ovulated. So this pocket here, what was the follicle, then becomes a little corpus luteum on the surface of the ovary. Okay, so do you guys have questions about your periods right now? Or guys, do you have questions about menstrual cycling? Okay, question?
Is it true, like how girls say, like, if they spend, like, a lot of time with somebody, like, they'll be on the same cycle?
Okay, is it true that women cycle together? I've heard yes, and then I've heard no. What I traditionally had learned was that there are hormones called pheromones that are secreted by all of us that we aren't consciously aware of, and that women will who live together will start to cycle together. And I mean, I know lots and lots of cases of where that's happened, and just, in families when girls start cycling, they'll follow their mom's cycle, and it's all, and they cycle together. And I know some of you are shaking your heads because you know that you have that experience. So we joke around about that a lot, but it's interesting though. Psychologically, there's all kinds of changes. They've done lots of studies about the changes and receptiveness of women to the opposite sex at different points in our cycle. Guess when we're most receptive? When would you think that we would have evolutionary programming to make us most receptive to the opposite sex? When would we psychologically want to be most receptive? When you're on your period? What advantage would that be? When you're after your period? How about when you're fertile?
Oh, that makes sense.
That makes sense, huh? During that window of fertility, when you're ovulating, that's when you're more like, hey, hi, yeah. You're more attracted to men. And guess what, ladies? When women are ovulating, there are changes in our skin and the flushing of our skin that actually makes us more attractive to the opposite sex. Really. Because you can't forget, we are members of the animal kingdom. And the number one, the prime imperative that we have is furthering our species. And that only happens through sex and exchange of genetic material and reproduction. So there's evolutionary stuff that there's a reason for it. Question?
I don't know if it's just me, like before I'm at the start, I always break out.
Yes. Yes, that's very common that pimples will break out, and then it has to do with the the changes in the estrogen levels and the the estrogen levels in your body.
Yep. I get like one sucker.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
I had a friend that, like, she started to have her period normal, and then I guess, like, out of nowhere, she started having her period for a long amount of time.
Yeah, so sometimes periods can be really irregular when you're younger, and they get really long, and you have episodes of bleeding where you have your period, and then 2 weeks later you have your period again, or your period you just spot and bleed and spot and bleed, and that has to do with your hormones just aren't regulating really well. And so a lot of times that's a big reason why girls will go on birth control pills, because it will regulate your cycle. And it doesn't mean that, you're doing it to regulate your cycle. Another reason why girls go on birth control pills is because you have really horrible heavy periods and lots of cramping, and birth control pills will decrease that. The nice thing with Obamacare, one of the things that they passed with Obamacare was that birth control pills are now free with your insurance. So you get birth control pills and you don't pay, $10 a month. You don't pay nothing. It's free. You don't pay anything. It sounds horrible. I say nothing. So, and you guys can all go to Planned Parenthood and get birth control pills. So I found this little cartoon, and I thought, this was really very helpful in showing you symbolically where things come from. And so we start off here. It shows the ovarian cycle and the uterine cycle. Okay, the ovarian cycle all starts out with low estrogen levels at the end of menstruation, and you have this little gland here that they're showing you is the pituitary gland. And it is actually located in your brain. And the pituitary gland is called the master gland because it regulates all of the hormones, not all. It regulates many, many hormones that then circulate throughout your bloodstream and stimulate other glands to release their hormones. So it is the one that's directing, and it is located at the base of your brain. It's all encased in bone, and if they have to do surgery on it, they have to go in through your nose. So they make an incision up underneath your top lip. They peel your skin back, and they enter in through your nasal cavity to get in to do surgery on your pituitary gland. So like if you had a tumor on your pituitary gland or something like that.
Wait, you said that the pituitary gland is encased in bone.
Yeah.
What does that look like?
What does that look like? It looks like there's bone all around it. There's bone surrounding it. And there's a little hollowed out cavity where you find the pituitary gland. So when we do our sheep brain dissections, we buy these economy brains. They're less expensive than the ones, and they just basically rip it out of the skull, and it usually has the pituitary gland missing because since it's encased in bone, when they rip it out, it just leaves it inside of the skull. So when are we going to do that? At the end of the semester, probably. We'll do our brain dissections. All right, so the pituitary gland releases FSH, which stimulates the ovary and the development of the follicle. So we have our follicular phase. Right here, this would be days 1 through 5 where you would have your period and you'd be sloughing off the endometrium. And then during the follicular phase, you're building up the lining of the uterine wall. And the follicle is getting larger and larger because of the influence of estrogens, okay? And then here, luteinizing hormone comes along, released also from the pituitary gland, and I love this. This cartoon is hilarious. It causes ovulation, so an elevation in luteinizing hormone. So you see the luteinizing hormone whacking the Graafian follicle, and it spits out the egg. And then this is because of the progesterone is released from the corpus luteum. The purpose of the progesterone is to maintain this endometrial lining because now you have your egg here floating down the fallopian tube with the chances of it being fertilized. And so you don't want to slough off your uterine lining. You want it to stay nice and thick and intact so that in case the egg is fertilized, it has a nice place to implant. But if implantation does not occur, then Corpus albicans, it turns white, it shrinks up, and no more progesterone. Your progesterone levels go down, and then that would cause the sloughing off of the endometrium. Wait, yes.
What happens if they tie your tubes? What is that?
Okay, we'll talk about that. What happens if they tie your tubes?
Oh no, I know what happens when they do it. But how does that?
So how does that work for preventing pregnancy? Is that what you're asking? Okay, so I'm going to draw a really bad uterus now. Oops. See? And then, see, it's really bad now. I have to erase. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Sorry, those of you listening to the screencast. But I'm doing this in real life, and I'm not a good drawer. Okay, so we have cervix here, and you get the idea, and then we have ovary hanging here and ovary hanging there, right? You got the idea. So, tubal ligation, they have two ways of doing it. They can go in through the vagina now, and they can put a coil in, which literally physically blocks, and then it irritates, and it causes a development of scar tissue, okay? And it blocks the fallopian tubes. So just wait. The other way that they can do it, which is like if you're already in surgery and having a C-section and you want your tubes tied, the traditional way is they would literally cut the fallopian tubes and tie off the ends. Little bow there, see? Little bow. Tie off the ends. So, does a woman ovulate every month when she has her tubes tied? Yes. She does. Is she still fertile? Yes, she is. Could she still get pregnant? Yes. Because the egg comes out and it goes in here. And what happens if the doctor didn't make really good knots? There are cases where things reattach and regrow back and women get pregnant. Or if you don't have a good knot here, you could have sperm get through and you have your egg there somewhere, right? So we got to make sure we have really good knots. Cut them, fold them over, tie them off real good. Burn them. Yeah. Now, what's the advantage of leaving the ovaries in? Why not just pull out the ovaries? You could sell them. Oh, no. You can sell eggs. You can't sell ovaries. You can sell your eggs, though.
When you sell your eggs, does that prevent you from...
No, when you sell your eggs, you go through a series. You can be an egg donor, and you have to give yourself all kinds of injections and then go through the procedure where they make you, what happens is when you're an egg donor, they give you hormone shots that you have to take, and it makes all of it makes the surface of your ovary have so many follicles on it that it looks like a raspberry. Okay, and every follicle is going to have an egg inside of it. And so then they go up vaginally with a tool, and they go and they suck up the eggs. They go, and they suck them up, and they take them out, and then they fertilize them in a lab, and they have frozen embryos. So if you want to donate eggs, you can go to organizations, and they keep books on file of the women and a profile and whether you want your donor to know who you are. I actually know someone who conceived a child through a donated egg, and she picked who the donor was going to be. It was like $5,000 per egg donation, not per egg, but every time you go through the procedure. So, and it doesn't. Remember, you have what, 300 to 500 eggs in your ovaries. It's not going to decrease your fertility at all. Okay, eggs cannot be frozen though alone. They have to be fertilized. So your the eggs will then be taken. So like if somebody picked you, yes, I want this person's eggs. I like the profile of this person and their personality and their dark hair and light eyes, and I like how that looks. Then they would pick. You would then start the hormone therapy. They would harvest your eggs, And then they would take the sperm from whatever the sperm donor was, maybe it was the husband, and they would take it and fertilize it in the lab once they extract the eggs. Then they can freeze the embryos and then implant the embryos at a later time when, in the donor, in the host. Maybe it's the mom. Maybe she had cancer and chemotherapy destroyed her ovaries, and so now she has no eggs herself. But her uterus is fine. So she wants to be able to carry the child, but she just doesn't have eggs. Maybe the mother is older and her eggs are no longer viable and she doesn't have good eggs anymore. There's chromosomal abnormalities. So she needs to use a donor egg. Dad's sperm is fine. Okay.
How is it that sometimes like ladies run out of eggs?
How is it that ladies run out of eggs? They don't.
Isn't there like some cases that like
No, we don't run out of eggs. We just go through menopause. And there's an evolutionary reason for that. Humans take a lot of care as they're growing up. And so you have to remember that our bodies don't know that it's 2016. Our bodies are still adapted for caveman days when if you made it to 35, that was old age. So you start menstruating when you're 10, 11 years old. You have the baby, and then you have years to rear the child, take care of it, because babies can't fend for themselves. Well, if you're still menstruating and you conceive and have a pregnancy when you're 45, 50 years old, that's disadvantageous for the continuation of the species, because statistically speaking, in caveman terms, you're not going to be around much longer. So no one's going to be there to take care of the baby. So the older you are, once you get to age 35, it's harder and harder to conceive, but there's an evolutionary reason for that. Also, our eggs are older. Remember, we're born with eggs in our ovaries. And so the older we are, the older our eggs are, and the greater the risk of genetic defects. At the age of 35, we get to see what's like an exponential increase. So if you look at your number of defects and age, you see like this, and then boom, at age 35, the chances of having defects goes up like that. So when I had my first daughter right before I turned 35, but my second child I had at 37, 38, and they considered me what was called a geriatric pregnancy. And geriatrics is the health care of old people. And so I was like, it said stamped in red letters across my file, geriatric pregnancy. And I was like, oh my God, I'm like, oh. But statistically, genetically speaking, I was old to be having a baby. And so there were all kinds of risk factors involved. And I had extra tests done. And I saw a perinatologist, a specialist, and they watched me extra closely because I was at higher risk for complications. Okay. What? Yes, this is all going to be on the screencast. They maybe can't hear the questions, but I repeat the questions. But you guys are asking questions. I'm sure they can hear you laugh. I don't know. I don't know what they can hear. I don't know. What can you guys hear? So did you hear that? We're all laughing now. And now you guys are all sitting there watching the Chromebooks with your earbuds in, and the sub is standing up at the front of the room wondering why you guys are all laughing. Weird. Okay, so how do birth control pills work? Okay. So usually there's a couple of different hormones in them, estrogen and progesterone, and they do two different things. Estrogen prevents ovulation. So you're not going to be ovulating every month. What are you laughing at?
The drawing. It's like, where do I get?
Oh, yeah. I know. Kind of inappropriate, huh? I'm going to stay right here. So those are the little spermy guys. And they're like, hey, what the freak? Sorry, inappropriate. I'll white it out for you.
No,
right?
it's funny.
No, it's funny? Okay, I'll leave it. So first of all, it acts by preventing ovulation. So you're not releasing an egg every month. Your body gets faked out into believing that it's pregnant. And then the progesterone is there to thicken the lining of the mucus secretions in there, and so it makes it harder for the sperm to swim around. And then the endometrium is thinner, so it's not a good nesting place for a fertilized egg. So in the odd chance that an egg is released, it wouldn't be a viable pregnancy, hopefully. Okay? So, with typical use, about 8 in 100 women, about 8% will become pregnant during their first year. That means while you're using the pill. Okay? But when the birth control pill is used effectively, properly, meaning you're taking it at the same day, at the same time, every day, so you're keeping those hormone levels really nice and high, that's going to be your best insurance, 99% effective. But do birth control pills protect you from STDs? No. It protects you. It's from pregnancy, but it's not 100%. And I know people that got pregnant while they were taking the pill, and they swear they took it exactly the way they were supposed to. So it's not 100%. Question.
This goes more of like with the pregnancy part.
Okay. A question about pregnancy.
When someone gets pregnant but they have twins.
Yes.
Is that
Okay.
2 eggs or is it?
Okay, so there's different ways we can get twins. I know, you guys love these questions. 2 ways we can get twins. How many eggs should you ovulate every month? 1. But what if you ovulated 2 eggs? So you got 2 eggs ovulated, and each one gets fertilized by a separate sperm. Okay, these are fraternal twins. And you can have a girl and a boy with fraternal twins because it's no more similar than any brother and sister would be. It just happens to be they were both conceived and carried at the same time. So that's fraternal twins. And fraternal means brother. Like fraternity, brotherhood, okay? Now, sometimes, and we don't really know what the reason is, 1 egg is fertilized by 1 sperm. Okay? And then for some reason, during that division process, it splits. And we get 2 cells, which then start to go through mitosis and become 4 and 8 and so on. And each one of these clumps develops into a baby, right? See, there's a little curl on its head. Okay, poorly drawn babies. See? Arms and legs. There's the diaper. Okay, again, I'm writing with something that looks like it's like squishy and it's not good. Please, don't hate on the drawings. You get the idea. So we got 2 babies, but they came from 1 egg, 1 zygote. Oh, whoops, backwards. Zygote. Oh, now I really messed up. Sorry, God, this is going to be great on the screencast.
They can see your drawings too.
Oh, yes, they get to see all of it in all of its glory. I know you guys are all laughing at the drawings, too. Okay, so 1 zygote, that means that these are the identical twins. Because their genetics, their DNA is exactly the same because they came from 1 egg. So could you, in a lab, take this and let it develop until it's, called a morula, which looks like a raspberry, and then split all these cells apart and make 5 or 6 identical babies? Yes. Because at this point, the cells are non-differentiated. That's a long word. Non-differentiated. They're not different from each other. They all could make a baby. So we're going to talk much more about that. One more question. I'm losing my voice. What?
In that case, I don't know if it's true or not. Is it true, like, to say, okay, my dad is a fraternal twin with his sister? Does it skip a generation because he didn't have any twins?
Okay, so my dad is a fraternal twin with his sister, and does it skip a generation because he
Never had twins.
Really, it's not something that's genetically. It has to do with the mom, not the dad. It has to do with the mom, because if the mom releases more than one egg in a month, then you're going to have fraternal twins. So it doesn't have to do anything with your dad. Your dad wasn't the reason. Your dad doesn't carry a gene that makes him have more twins. It's got to be through the mom. Now, we really don't know like why identical twins, sometimes you'll see a lot of identical twins in a family. That's some phenomenon that happens with why does this egg split. This is from abnormal ovulation. Now, are there drugs, like fertility drugs that women take that make them ovulate more than one egg? Yes. And in those cases, is that woman at risk for having multiple births? Absolutely. So you have to be really, really careful. Question? Yes, if it's on your mom's side, and is it fraternal or identical? It's identical. Yeah. If you see a lot of twins in your, if you have a lot of twins, hello. You know what though? The nice thing is, that's two for the price of one. One pregnancy, and boom, you got your family complete. Oh, it's harder and it's more risky. Yeah. No, not necessarily. It's not an absolute. You might be at higher risk, though. There's a chance because, yeah. Okay. So, birth control pills come in lots of different varieties, lots of different packaging. Hold that question and we'll try to come back to it, okay? One thing that they all have in common is that you see this week, they have this 1 week of, and there's not always a different color, but you're always going to have 1 week of a sugar pill, a placebo. And this would be when those pills have no hormone in them. And so when your estrogen and progesterone levels drop, then you have your period. So this would be the week of your period. But the cool thing is that there's no biological reason why you absolutely have to have a period. So if you go on the pill, you can talk with your doctor and say, you know, I'm going to be going on a great cruise trip and my period is supposed to hit that week. And, you know, you can actually start your next pill pack and skip your period. Everyone's like, I'm going to go get some. Okay. So, interesting, huh? Okay, as sexually transmitted diseases, I will have to wait and do this lecture when I'm there in person with my 5th and 6th period students. So I'm going to sign off now, and for 5th and 6th period, this class better not clean up. 5th and 6th period, you're not cleaning up either right now. You're going to work on annotating your Cornell notes, and then if you're absolutely done with that, you can use the rest of your class time to get an anatomy book and start working on your notes for tonight on the male reproductive system. Until I see you tomorrow, mañana, goodbye.